might be on other people's end. And so start raising your hands if there's more than a few of you in the chat, please. So hopefully we can kind of talk through, what is this metaverse thing that we hear about in the press, and we have the folks like Mark Zuckerberg walking around in his virtual world trying to convince us it's a good idea, and then we have folks like Chad and myself who kind of come at this from a Web3 crypto perspective. What are all these NFTs and how do they relate to the metaverse and things like that. I think it's a legitimately what is this question, because it's a big I have a friend who likes to call these suitcase words. It's a word you can throw out there, and there's a whole bunch of things that can kind of get stuffed into it and transported around and thrown around. Not too dissimilar, I'm sure, in other sessions where we've talked about AI, artificial intelligence. It is it's a challenging word to drill down, and practically in the day-to-day for me and my business or my travels through the world as a consumer. What the heck does this actually mean? What does it do? Is really challenging. And Chad, with that, I'll kind of, that's where we're kind of hoping to explore, a bit of my background just for the rest of the OpenXO communities. I'm, could participate in OpenXO as kind of a Web3 contributor. That's kind of the exponential technology that gets me excited, and that I talk to corporations, startups, and everything in between about how do we adopt this, how do we use it, what does it really do, where is the value generated from. So I kind of come at from that perspective. Long history as a entrepreneur and in the tech space, but before that worked for big corporations, kind of understanding the perspective of when you're talking to the VP of whatever at that S&P 500 company. They need to be really, really clear on how does using this technology help me make my bonus, and drilling that down. I'm sure all of us, exponential technology advocates, when we're going into those environments, are acutely aware of we need to thread the needle of this stuff's really cool. This is, there's not much doubt that this is going to be part of the future that we're all going to go live in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, whatever it is. Meanwhile, the stakeholders that we need to say yes to these things are, I got an OKR I got to make in 90 days. How's this help? and bridging that gap's a real challenge. So with that, I'll throw it over to you, Chad, kind of give a bit more of your background, what you're seeing, what you're working on these days, and we can kind of start tying that into, making that into some use case conversations and some, kind of practical 1, 2, 3 of, okay, metaverse is cool. How do I start? What do I do? Type thought process.
Sure, absolutely. So very high level, basically been investing in crypto since 2013. Like everyone, you have your rites of passage of investing the wrong way, not understanding how to install the wallet, doing all these, different scams and everything else. But at the end of the day, I call it the rites of passage, right? So because you're always learning through each of these experiences. And the same holds true with Web3 and the metaverse. So my company's called MetaWin Media. We help brands basically have a low risk entry into the Web3 space, whatever that may be. So it's all encompassing. So Web3, in my mind, in my personal opinion, but seems like the vocabulary and verbiage changes like every month. But basically Web3 in my mind is all encompassing. It's the metaverse experiences, which there's like over 120 different metaverses right now. And there's different types of metaverses. Blockchain, DeFi, different technologies, NFT collections, NFT utility. So for me, it's kind of all encompassing. But so we're trying to help essentially make that easier for the CMOs and CIOs of the world, right? Because it's a very top-down approach, as Scott was saying, where the CEO says, "Hey, man, we need to be in Web3. Get us some NFTs. Get it, whatever you need to do. Get us in the Web3 space, whatever that may be." And we're here to kind of ease that through communication, training, education, as well as providing the right tools. I personally have met probably over 100 different Web3 platforms in the last year. I could say 20% of them are not around anymore because it's such a new space that it's very challenging for the CMO or CIO or person responsible to know where to begin and know where to start. Now, regarding the metaverse, it has amazing potential, amazing opportunity, but it really depends on the end goal of the experience and the end goal for your customers as well. I mean, is it a product placement? Is it a customer engagement placement? Is it a customer loyalty placement? Are there NFTs involved in it? So there's many different factors, and I think that's kind of what we're going to review today, Scott, if I'm not mistaken.
I think that's a great setup, Chad. Appreciate that. And I think kind of looking at it, I think the primary example I think we have out there in the corporate world is kind of that CMO perspective of there's a brand opportunity here of, I think we've seen that, Pepsi's done stuff, Nike's done stuff. There's probably 4 or 5 others that could be rattled off pretty quickly. So there's a brand there's a brand impact, and there's a brand opportunity, and then there's the kind of technology risks that go into that funnel. And then I think it's like, what kind of outcomes are these groups getting? Like the earned media runway, which is the obvious, like, we're on the front page of Bloomberg. We're getting the press of, Nike's got a metaverse, and you can go check out NFT sneakers. When Adidas does that, they're going to get less. And then when, K-Swiss does it, they'll get less. So that kind of diminishing return, all of a sudden we're getting out of that. We're going to do it for the earned media output to, like, what's the impact for our customer? What's the real sustainable impact for our brand? Like, how's that kind of, let's talk a little bit about, like, what's the Nike and the Pepsi use case, and what did they kind of have to go through to go, how do we do that? Do we do it, which metaverse do we go into? Do we build our own? And I think we want to drill down into, like, the next wave of this is going to be, does this need to impact sales?
Yeah.
Eventually it does, but
Exactly.
The starting point is like, selling a couple $1 million of NFTs doesn't move the needle for Nike.
Exactly. It's quite interesting too. Like when you ask the question about which metaverse, there's over 150 different metaverses and more on the way, right? And it's different blockchains, it's different development technicalities and skill sets, where you have Roblox, Voxel, whatever. But there's different reasons to really invest as a brand inside a specific metaverse. For example, like the sandbox. The sandbox is incredible for game and gamification and game dynamics and play to earn, learn to earn kind of concepts, right? If you want your customers to learn about a product, you can build really cool learn to earn games where at the end of that conquest, they can earn an NFT and get that NFT airdropped into their wallet as a utility, as a reward for that brand. Where Decentraland is more static, out of this world architecture, live events, and not really focused on game or gamifications, right? So it's more about experiences versus games. And then you have so many more, but then you have to really look at it as a brand as, okay, how many hurdles do I want my customer to go through to be able to get this experience that I spent 3 months building, which I think is fantastic as a brand, which I'm sure it is. But what are the hurdles that my customer has to go through to be able to experience that, right? So, and that's where the different metaverses come in. And that's where you see a lot of the debate online. You see a lot of the debate happening on LinkedIn is, does my customer have to go through 4 steps of onboarding inside the sandbox, where I need to create an avatar, I need to connect my wallet, I need to go through and find the specific location, experience out thousands of experiences? What marketing do I need to do to really kind of hone in it and direct that customer to that specific experience and get the ROI or the data and analytics needed to justify the project, right? So there's a lot of questions around that. And that's why I think, for brands that are just testing the waters, there's other easier methods of first-person immersive digital experiences where it's like a digital twin or 3D AR VR kind of experiences that requires zero onboarding on behalf of the customer. You can have these experiences on the company website, on a mobile app, and everything else, and you still have the same NFT gated experiences. You can sell NFTs. And for example, like, Decentraland and Sandbox at this moment, I'm not sure if you know, Scott, but even at this moment today, you still can't purchase an NFT and experience. You have to leave the experience to go and mint an NFT, right? So, I know they're building something. I know there's some partnerships happening where that's going to happen, but that probably won't happen until Q1 of next year. So there's a lot of these like like these checklist items, and it's kind of like, which, if you don't know, you don't know. What you don't know, you don't know. So it's a lot of research, and the space is changing. Like 3 months in the space is like a year. So hats off to any CMO that's really doing amazing projects, because it's super advanced.
It's I think that the number one thing that you touched on, there's three or four things you touched on there, is kind of looking at the right space, the right environment for the objective that you have. So like I think that learn to earn kind of example in Sandbox is really good versus I went and played in the Decentraland space that Michael's kind of set up here for the OpenXO conference, which is like visually cool, immersive kind of
Amazing.
experience.
Yeah. Live
You're kind of
events.
looking
Yeah.
at, okay, what do I do? I walk around, I check out the interesting pieces and the stuff on the wall, which is cool. But you gotta, all right, what's the next iterative experience? I think one of the things that I've thought about in that space, and I think this is translated across a lot of the evolution of kind of Web3 technologies, whether it was the currencies, then the smart contract platforms, NFTs, DeFi. It's especially from a corporate perspective, understanding the roadmap of,
Yeah.
okay,
Exactly.
I just built a tower in Decentraland. What's Decentraland's roadmap? What's going to change in the
Yeah.
next 2 weeks, next 3 months, next 3 years, in terms of how that's going to evolve, so that I have business continuity. I can build my own internal roadmap to match up to that roadmap. And I go, oh, if we're going to enable, I'll call it e-commerce of, oh, I want a cool NFT. I want to buy it. I want to do it live in that metaverse space. Safe to say that's on the roadmap, but exactly how is it on the roadmap? What's going to do? How does that integrate? Is that going to be fiat enabled or not fiat? And all those kind of questions that I would have as a CMO going like, all right, it's built my Nike store into Decentraland or Sandbox. I'd like to sell merchandise here. How do I do it? Who do I talk to?
Yeah.
How's that work? And like my experience, I'm sure you've had some experiences of, not all of these decentralized protocols are very well organized for that conversation. In terms of
Absolutely.
who can, well, the community is going to decide a roadmap
Yeah.
is not an answer that passes the
Yeah.
snuff of a corporate engagement. So I think I kind of drill that down to the question of like, how are we looking at, as users and builders in these environments, how we kind of get a sense of roadmap stability, partnership between the platforms and someone who wants, a corporation or an entity like OpenXO that wants to build in it. Like, what are the kind of considerations and best practice for like, what's this thing going to look like in 3 months when I'm done building the thing that I'm building right now based on its current state? Is it all going to break?
Exactly. Yeah. No, it's a great question. And again, I don't want to sound negative on the metaverse experiences by far. I mean, I'm very bullish. I think it's the future. I think it's the future of engagement. I think the Gen Zs of the next customer generations are going to want and demand these experiences versus Web2 experiences. But it's just such a new space. And I guess we're just trying to play devil's advocate here on trying to identify all the potential challenges before you have to experience them yourselves, in which is time and money, right? But as far as all the different tool sets, and this is something that I really invested a lot of time in, my team invested a lot of time in, is and meeting all these different Web3 platforms, because all of these Web3 platforms, and there's so many of them, and there's a lot of them in stealth mode that are just coming out. I'm actually here in DevCon Bogota right now. I've already met with like 3 different companies from all over the world that are still in stealth, that are coming out with some amazing Web3 tech that solve little pieces of the puzzle for a brand, right? And if you can kind of put all these little pieces of the puzzle together and create this amazing solution, and you're going to be so advanced in that regards in 2023. But for brand's sake, because in any metaverse experience, beyond the architecture, beyond the game dynamics, and beyond the gamification and customer engagement, you're always going to want to need an NFT associated to that, right? Because if you do a play to earn, learn to earn, move to earn, whatever, there's always kind of an end reward at the end of that. And that normally is an NFT. Now, brand NFT, company NFTs are much different than the NFTs you see in 2020, 2021. 2020, 2021 NFT collections are kind of the individual artist that's launching their collection with the sole purpose of generating revenue, right? Where I envision, and this resonates with a lot of brands I've spoken with, they're creating NFT collections that are free to mint, but attached with a ton of amazing utility, right? So it's all about that utility and what that customer sees value in. So it could be based on loyalty, it could be based on different different product announcements, product enhancement. I mean, really anything. The sky's the limit with the utility side. So I would focus on the roadmap, as you said, is focus on first the NFT collection, the NFT utility. Is it based around customer loyalty? Is it based around the brand's products? Before you start thinking about the metaverse and the metaverse experience, right? Because the customers of tomorrow are not going to want to engage without, I call it the TikTok generation, without the instant gratification, without some kind of reward for engaging, right?
Yeah, I think that's an important distinction. Is kind of, I don't know, breaking them, but like there's a separation between kind of the Bored Ape, CryptoPunk, as the kind of pinnacle NFT examples of, well, they were built for Web3 native humans who are going, well, I want the stamp of approval that I was early, or I'm in, or I have a lot of ETH, whatever it happens to be, in terms of what the signaling power of those brands are, because they're their own standalone brands now. And then people are grafting their personal brands around those entities, and you see that with the kind of the avatar aspect of that. But as we kind of use the major brand, especially the consumer brand example, as they come into it, going like, well, we already have the brand. Exactly. Everyone knows what Budweiser is. Everyone knows what Pepsi is. Everyone knows what Nike is. How are they, using these things as a different format of that kind of loyalty engagement,
exactly,
type mechanism? I think is really important and fascinating. I think the path to adoption. I think that's, let's explore that a bit. I think the challenge of, I need a wallet in order to go, if I'm going to go to bigbrand.com, hit the mint button, well, I need to have, I need a MetaMask, or I need some digital Web3 wallet in order to get that. And there's an onboarding process to that. That's something I think reasonably well educated, so anybody who wants to do it can hurdle that. But I think the next step is like, okay, I have big brand, I have Acme Inc.'s new branded NFT, and then figuring out what's kind of the available path that Acme Inc. can kind of create for me as the NFT holder, obviously some kind of loyal brand fan, to get me going down a path of engagement that gives them data that validates that. B, obviously, I think increases the lifetime value of that advocate and that brand engagement. Going, okay, I got the Acme Inc. NFT. Am I going to go do a gamified challenge? Am I going to change my Twitter profile? Like, what have you kind of seen in that space, and what are kind of the tools that those brands might want to go explore to go, yeah, we should do something in Decentraland or Sandbox or some other type of property where it's like, come to our space and do the cool thing, and hopefully it is a cool thing.
Yeah. It's a great question. Yes.
Because I mean, that's the game of a brand, is get the dopamine going. If I want more of that thing.
Absolutely. Instant gratification. Absolutely. So a brand, depending on the vertical of the brand, depending on the customer type, I think the brands in 2023 really need to cater to both the Gen Z who are Web3 ready, and the existing older customers that they can't afford to lose. You should have communication and opportunities for both, right? So the Web3 Gen Z customers, who will be the new purchasing power in the next 10 years, which is $1 billion purchasing power, will be able to connect that wallet no problem. And you should be able to have the communication onboarding specifically for that generation, that demographic. For the existing customers, there's a lot of tools. Like MetaMask right now is coming out with called MetaMask Snap, which is an amazing tool to be able to customize the UI UX of onboarding new customers. So we're actually doing a project now where we're utilizing MetaMask Snap and all the other tools that are coming out to be able to, instead of doing the 4 or 5 step process of creating a wallet, right? It's actually a much more user friendly, step by step, gamified kind of, which you control on the UI UX side to help onboard more and have more existing customers adopt, right? So they can take part of these amazing loyalty programs, amazing NFT programs, or you can even offer these NFTs using a credit card or a fiat, which converts into crypto, right? You can use MoonPay or CrossMint. There's a lot of platforms that help convert, people, those customers that don't want to have a wallet. Then you just have a custodial wallet as a brand, for an example, right? But yeah, it gets a little more complicated. But once you have identified the two different target markets and have successfully onboarded those, I guess the point then is like, okay, what do you offer, right? So as I said earlier, like the brands providing NFT collections based around a product, based around an offering, based around loyalty or whatever that may be, it really is the utility. And I think if you kind of reverse engineer your marketing and loyalty and NFT packages, and again, like the anonymous who just mentioned, don't talk about Web3, don't talk about smart contracts, don't talk about blockchain to your end customers, just let it happen and it'll happen. There's a lot of amazing case studies coming out with that theory. Is like, just don't let your customers know. It just all happens on the back end, right? And they just get these really cool things. But as far as that utility is super important. There's a lot of case studies around utilities for brands. Fortunately and unfortunately, the multi-billion-dollar companies like Nike, Adidas are kind of leading the way because they have the budgets to do this. They have the ability to go in and test it, and I really consider this like an R&D budget for companies. It's not a marketing budget, it's an R&D budget, because you don't want your team to be left behind in 2023 by not experimenting and dipping your toes into something, even, no matter how big it is, into the space.
Yeah, I think that'll resonate with a lot of the OpenXO community. Is like, big piece of the methodology that is kind of advocated for in the group is, fighting the antibodies that resist change inside the corporation. Of the literal design of a corporate entity is refine exactly what we did yesterday today, so we improve it by 1% in some version of tomorrow. And so all the systems and processes are essentially designed to say no, don't change anything. E-commerce is a great example of that. Of everyone believed that brick and mortar, and do we use channel or our own brick and mortar was the only kind of the 50-year question. And now it's like, do I want to be a e-commerce first brand and go direct to consumer through my web property, or am I going to use Amazon? Being the kind of critical question of kind of any of the brands we've kind of battied about would be like, I'm not a big believer in Foot Locker if I'm Nike. I'm really concerned about Amazon if I'm Nike. Interesting, that R&D example I think is really critical. It's kind of using you got to create these dots, not the line, because if you use the geeky kind of S curve adoption, or kind of three waves of innovation like McKinsey or whatever. It's like you'll suddenly find yourself way over on the right side of that graph when this stuff has gone mainstream, and the startups that have started early are blowing by you, and then you're in scramble mode, of which you might get yourself into zombie mode of like, okay, we're not dead because of our balance sheet is so big. But so kind of drilling that down, like what do you kind of see as like the experiment path that some of these, that we as advisors and people going to the market might want to be talking to decent sized brands with whether they're 6-figure, low 7-figure budgets, of here's the experiment, here's kind of the tapestry you might want to go experiment with. Here's how you need to start thinking about this. Here's the type of talent that's probably going to require, or the type of firms that you need to engage to go figure these things out. Because it's not a whole lot different than, we could dial this back to 2012.
Yeah.
Do we build our own mobile app, or do we go mobile web? And who do we hire to go do mobile app versus mobile web? Two different types of organizations and two different do we optimize for Android or iOS is no different than do I optimize for Decentraland or Sandbox? Like those kind of questions are now, that cycle is going to repeat itself. So kind of I think using that kind of mobile, the iPhone is now in every person's hand, the Android device is in every person's hand, 2012-ish. I think we're probably more like a 2008 or 9 if we kind of use that historical analogy. But we kind of found a pattern in that. And do you think that analogy makes sense? And does it translate in terms of like, okay, in 2023, if I'm talking to that brand, let's start with a mobile website. Let's optimize it for HTML5 or not. There's kind of things that we had to go through as technology developers in that phase. And we're kind of there now, I think, in this Metaverse, NFT, Web3 space. Every product group's got, the 25-year-old in the rooms at least going, hey, we should do something here. And a lot of places have CMOs, CEOs, boards going like, tell me what we're doing this, 2023 about this. And, here's your $100,000 or 10 million, whatever it happens to be, to go figure that out. Let's go get some of that. So which we kind of frame to those guys.
That's just shocking.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I would highly recommend, I've been in technology for many, many years and I'm a big believer in utilizing existing tech and not reinventing the wheel, especially if you're just starting out. I would recommend utilizing some of these like NFT as a service platforms, Metaverse as a service platforms, hiring a consultant that can guide you and put those pieces of the puzzle for you based on your project goals, your KPIs, what you're looking to accomplish as a beta, right? As a Web3 beta before you dive really big into bigger projects, right? You lower your risk, you lower your time to adoption, both on the internal team side as well on the customer side, and utilize these existing tools and create an NFT collection, and see how it resonates, and be sure to communicate and create expectations with your customer base, saying, hey, this is our first NFT collection. Give us some feedback. We want to reward you, and like what works, what doesn't, what resonates, what do you think is valuable in this? And you don't need to create really massive blockchain projects. A lot of this already exists. A lot of it's open source. A lot of it's turnkey. You just need that guidance that will eliminate a lot of the research and hours you would take, as a team to do, and help that execution and help, create that success. But yeah, I mean, it really depends on the company, right? I mean, there's case studies where companies are using this internally for employees, for employee engagement, for employee rewards and loyalty. Web3, right? It just doesn't have to be about the customer. It can be about your internal teams as well. And there's so many different applications, really depending on the vertical. If you've got retail, we're doing a big project for a big mall here, and the mall wants to be Web3 in the Metaverse, right? What does that really mean? So we're trying to educate them and guide them on the right path. But there's so much potential for retail, right? There's so much potential for cinemas. There's so much potential for events. There's so much potential for really any kind of product that has a customer base that wants to engage.
So that kind of what I heard there a bit is the digital twin. It seems to be a bit of the, like, we're kind of doing that here in these virtual events. Is we can go do these in Decentraland and places like that where you can have that avatar conversation versus the Zoom or the EventX conversation. They're very, there's arguments that Twitter's a metaverse on because we're all communicating that way. But I think that digital twin example is solid. I think kind of the next piece, and I've had a prior conversation about this, is the data. Because I mean, if you're running a good experiment is designed for pretty much one reason, to gather data against the hypothesis and either validate it, invalidate it more often than not, iterate to the next experiment or the next modality of the experiment, or to gather more data. And so I would, that's kind of been my standard approach when talking to anybody about how do you adopt new technology. It's like, you got to run this, do the smallest possible experiment that could lead to something useful. Get data on usefulness. Iterate out. It's like, hey, if 30 active users walk through the gallery in your metaverse space during the live event that has 300 people is 1% good, 10% good, probably. But you got to benchmark that. So it's kind of, how challenging is the data gathering, and like what kind of data seems to make sense in terms of you're running a bit of this kind of, let's use your digital twin type example as where we can anchor some obvious data of, hey, I got 300 people signed up for the event, I got 30 of them in the room. How would I measure that? What would that look like? What kind of additional information, digital dust would come off that we can then start to use as a model to go, okay, next time we do that, let's make sure that we have more interactions, more conversations, make the golden path to get somebody from the website to the metaverse space easier. Like what do those kind of things look like in terms of the analytics and how they look? Because all these things are always pretty immature when they first start, because it's build it and then stick the dashboard on the back is usually how those things go.
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's definitely an interesting topic at this point because the space is so new, right? So I can tell you right now, the sandbox in Decentraland very limited to zero data and analytics about your experience right now. It's just the space is just too new. They're not releasing it for some reason. There's ways around it, but you have to be pretty creative with your development team who's building. There's zero APIs feeding data out of those experiences. So it just shows you how new the space is. But I am, MetaWin Media, we're actually partnered with 4 different data and analytics Web3 metaverse companies, and we're helping them with their analytics. And some of them are not even publicly launched yet live, So I think by Q1 next year, there's going to be a lot of platforms, software as a service analytic platforms for different web metaverse and Web3 experiences. But some of the metaverse experiences that are not Decentraland or Sandbox, that are no avatar, first person immersive, they have built their own analytics inside their own platforms. So those are readily available. I think, it really depends on the project. There's ways of collecting data, and a person on the Q&A actually asked the same thing. It's like, pulling data from individual wallets and from individual users and utilizing that data kind of like Google or Facebook to throw ads at them, right? I know 2 different platforms that are utilizing wallet addresses, but it's a very limited data what they're collecting. Really, it's about kind of demographic NFT data. Like, for example, like what type of collections do these guys own? Do they have a bunch of sports collections? Are they into sports? How much do they Twitter? How much do they do this? So it's very limited data. I don't really see any kind of proactive advertising to these wallets anytime soon because of just the lack of technology and lack of data. But there is ways around, depending on the project, depending on which metaverse you use, depending on your NFT collection. There's a lot of NFT data available, just not really metaverse data, the enclosed metaverse data. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does, because it's done a lot of conversations around, is your wallet address your new email address, your new postal code, whatever, what have you, in terms of that, the CRM analogy, the customer relationship management analogy that's kind of trying to transition over. I think the fancy word, the geeky, the skeuomorphic. Let's move the customer relationship ledger. We moved it from a Rolodex to a spreadsheet to Salesforce Cloud, and now it's moving into wallets. And I think that's an interesting avenue, because it's like there's lots of stuff around good wallet management of, if you had 10 crypto punks, I wouldn't recommend you leave all 10 crypto punks in the same wallet.
Yeah. Most people have like 20 different wallets at the same time, right? So how many actual wallets are there in existence?
But if you identify that wallet that's got a crypto punk in it, you now have a very high signal of the net worth of whatever human is behind that wallet. That person's got 6 figures of some form.
Well, even today, like the news that came out yesterday, like Google, you can actually search a wallet on Google, and they'll tell you everything that's on that wallet now. So it's
Yeah.
becoming definitely more transparent with decentralized elements, protecting the wallet owner, because it is still decentralized. You have no idea who that person is. All you see is digits, or you see an ENS domain, which is custom wallet ID. And I actually just registered today from another platform, the MetaWin wallet ID plus my team members' individual wallet names. So just to test that out for onboarding into different platforms, much easier per person on my team, which is quite interesting. So a lot of innovations happening in this space.
And from like it's a bit underneath the hood nerdier question of like when users are coming through and authenticating a Web3 experience, typically, but by signing a wallet, from that wallet address, so like my Scott J Howard.eth address, it's got a number of NFTs sitting behind it. Those NFTs can token gate me to a bunch of experience. Are those tools kind of getting no code, low code enabled? And then what are kind of some of the interesting use case examples you've seen of, I can come validate, like I have my OpenXO certificate NFT, because we're pretty much the 15,000 people in this ecosystem all have one of, I think, 4 different badges that says they've done different levels of education and training around the OpenXO methodology. I'm the lowest. So as the lowest of the 4 in terms of the amount of certification I've done, I'm like, well, at least I can certify, validate a part of the community, and then that could gate me into something. How nuanced have you seen those kind of gating and, sign it, show it, prove that you got it, and then move on to segmented type of transactions? Can you do lots of cool stuff, or is it like, a Bored Ape, doesn't matter which one. You sign with it, we got you in the door.
I mean, it's a great question. I think that use case is more relative towards internal HR purposes, related to internal training. You can have soul tokens where it's non-transferable NFT related to that person's soul, if you will, which can then start adding in like their resumes, their certifications. I mean, I remember, in my last corporate job, which was many years ago, and I'd be getting these certifications like gamification and everything else, and I would print it out and I'd go take it to the HR person to put in my file, right? And this was in 2013. And I'm like, wait a minute, I'm thinking about today, like, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. I'm sure she didn't really care about my piece of paper, Did it really increase my salary? No, not really. I mean, so it was more kind of personal, like, wow, I did it, pat myself on the back. But if that's forever attached to my digital smart contract resume or soul token, my NFT associated to a specific company that can be transferable from company to company, that would be quite interesting, right? And that's all kind of token gated. It just follows you wherever you go. And that can also be associated to the internal company's metaverse, right? I mean, there's plenty of B2B metaverses out there that are very easy to get into, or as far as like onboarding as an employee. You can do like the meta that's coming out. Everyone's kind of really focused on the internal business meetings, brainstorming events. It's all internally for that company, but you need an NFT to actually get into that. It's NFT gated to get into that experience, right? You can't fake an employee email address, whatever, and have access to vital internal information, for example, in a metaverse meeting. So many applications around that area. I think that area personally is going to explode faster than, and be more adopted faster than the brand to customer side of it.
No, I think that's great insight, because I mean, it speaks. This community is kind of built around that notion of, we've all engaged in an education path. We kind of have some core ethos of, we think exponential technology is going to impact how corporations and organizations move their way through the world, and those that are more exponential will do better. And validating that, right? It's like the carrying that certification forward through these different ways, and it's no different than I got ISO whatever the heck certified 15 years ago. sitting in a HR record that's probably in a cold storage,
No,
never to be seen
hey,
again.
it's on my LinkedIn, right? Don't forget that. It's on my
I
LinkedIn
put it up
profile.
there.
Yep.
No different than my
Yeah.
Six Sigma or all those things that we, most of the folks in this community have all done things like that in their corporate lives because that's what we do.
Yeah.
I think that's that kind of B2B internal, some level external of like, how do we create a share, a permeable shared space between us and our customer where it's an education, it's a showroom, it's a, I think
Exactly.
we've all kind of seen the kind of grand vision that's that a bit of Hollywood hocus pocus and Minority Report type world where it's like, you break open the airplane model and there's the 55,000 pieces that go into the engine, and we can now look at them and pull them out and talk to our suppliers and vendors. And I think that image is really cool. The technologies, the graphics cards and the rendering and the amount of compute that you need underneath that stuff is making that more and more and more. It's exponential. Like literally by definition is like the core of exponential stuff is that NVIDIA card and high speed internet and all that jazz is going to allow us to open up that engine and look at it together here in a virtual space. The What are you kind of seeing as like the skills? Is there like there's the obvious, if you're going to go code a smart contract and things like that, there's a set of skills over there, but in terms of like just corporate innovation, change management, leadership, is this as technical as the kind of previous path where it's like it's got to be like a CTO, CIO led initiative, or can the marketers, HR, management teams kind of get their arms around enough of this fast enough to kind of get a use case to happen out of it without I got to go hire 15 Unity engineers and compare them up with 22 Solidity engineers, and congratulations, I just spent $17 million and have no chance in hell of hiring those humans.
Yes.
Type problem.
Yeah. No, yeah, it's a great question, and I'm always a big believer in MVPs and POCs, right? Minimal viable products and proof of concepts, right? So I always recommend starting off small and outsourcing as much as you can. Get some wins, right, under the belt. Get some great case studies, and then take that to say, okay, now we want to take this internally. Now we want to build our own applications using third-party API software, right? I guess there's different elements of internal development, right? So if you're saying, okay, so we want to build our own blockchain, we want to build our own metaverse, we want to build our own smart contracts, yeah, you're going to need a massive team, right? And it's going to be hard to find those people because all of these heavily invested companies, metaverse companies, are just sucking up all that talent and they're paying handsomely for it, right? Where if you have a smaller team, more agile team that are more like project managers, API integration people, Web3 knowledge individuals, and I do think there's going to be a chief Web3 officer soon. And on LinkedIn, you already see the chief metaverse officers. You're going to see chief Web3 officers very soon. And it's a small agile team that can communicate properly with these Web3 NFT as a service platforms that all you have to do is integrate APIs and you're ready to go, right? So, and that's a much more smaller agile approach to having internal tools without reinventing the wheel and building massive IP projects.
I think that's a great message to leave the team here with Chad. I appreciate that because I think it's can take an agile approach. You can get somewhere in 90 days. You can get somewhere without extremely scarce engineering talent. Probably have to work with an agency and stuff like that has some of those humans available, but we know how to hire those. We know how to do that stuff. There's a lot of malleability in terms of being agile, experimenting. I think that drill it down to the proof of concept, take the proof of concept to MVP, and kind of crawl, walk, run approach being available is super important because it's like it's a lot easier pill to swallow, literally, and it's kind of key to getting people on board and adopting. So really appreciate you sharing your knowledge and your experience in the space with the OpenXO community. For everybody out there who wants to get in touch and reach out, I'm sure Chad and I are very findable, and I will help navigate that. Chad, you can want to shout out your contact information, I guess stuff, go right ahead. Everybody can reach me at LinkedIn's usually the best place to find me, Scott J. Howard. So please hit me up on LinkedIn. You can find me there, and chat, I'm sure, is equally easy to find.
Yeah, just on my profile, actually on OpenXO, I updated my profile, so my LinkedIn's on my profile here if you want to reach out. And thank you so much for the opportunity, Scott. It was great having this meeting.
No, this was excellent, and me too. My OpenXO profile's up to speed, so please, everybody, reach out, ask questions. We're more than help you navigate. If we're not the right humans, we probably know who the right humans are and can help you get there.
Exactly.
If, Metaverse, Web3 are places you need to go explore. So appreciate that, everybody, and with that, we'll sign off, and hopefully, if there's further follow-on questions, we'll be happy to figure them out. Cheers.